Ready to dive into some serious resilience today? Buckle up, because we're tossing out those old cliches about gritting your teeth and channeling your inner John Wayne.
It's time for a fresh perspective.
We're talking Steve Magness's book, Do Hard Things, and let me tell you, he throws that whole toughness equals suppressing your emotions thing right out the window. If you're facing a challenge or just curious about what real resilience looks like, this deep dive is for you.
What I love about Magnus is he dismantles this myth we've bought into. Like, we think to be tough, you had to slap on this stoic face and just power through, emotions be damned right.
Totally. But Magnus is like, nope, ditch the facade. Giving up when things get hard, I mean, sometimes that's actually the toughest thing to do.
And this is where it gets really interesting, he says. Chasing external validation, like, trying to impress others with how tough you are. It's like building your motivation on a foundation of sand. It's about finding that deeper why.
Right, those goals that really light you up from the inside out, not just the ones that sound good to other people. He tells this great story about a study with elementary school kids, right? They were given a stack of books and told to pick which ones they wanted to read. The kids who were like overly confident, they went straight for the books way above their reading level.
Oh, I can see it now, like a third grader going for like War and Peace or something.
Exactly. And predictably, they struggled, got frustrated, and a lot of them just gave up. But the kids who picked books that felt challenging but still within reach,
They were more honest with themselves about where they were at.
Exactly. And guess what? Those were the kids who actually improved their reading the most.
Because they set realistic expectations.
It's such a good point that aligning your goals with reality, being authentic about where you are right now, that is often the key to making real progress.
And speaking of keeping it real, Magnus gives some really practical advice about applying this to, well, everyday life.
Yeah, let's hear it. What's the secret sauce?
First, he says, stop chasing those look-at-me goals. The ones you choose because they sound impressive to other people. Instead, get honest about what you want, what actually matters to you.
I love that. And what about self-doubt? That feeling that creeps in, do we try to just ignore it?
Magnus would say, no way. That self-doubt, as uncomfortable as it can be, it's usually a signal. It might be telling you to check your expectations, maybe adjust your course a little. Maybe the goal needs tweaking or breaking down into smaller steps.
He talks about this idea of raising the floor, which really resonated with me. Instead of aiming for 100 push-ups when you can barely do 10 and then feeling defeated, what if you started with a goal that you know you can crush, even if it's 2 push-ups, or just holding that plank for a few more seconds?
It's about building momentum, starting with those small wins, because they create a positive feedback loop. You begin to trust yourself, believe in your ability to progress, and that's so powerful. It's like laying the groundwork for tackling those bigger challenges down the line.
Okay, so we're getting real with our goals, tapping into that inner drive. But Magnus throws in this other piece to the puzzle that I found so interesting, and it's this idea of interoception.
Yeah, it does sound kind of like complicated sciencey jargon, doesn't it?
It does.
But it's pretty straightforward, actually. Interoception is basically your ability to tune in to your body's signals.
Right, and we're not just talking about basic emotions here.
Right, yeah, it's more nuanced than just knowing if you're happy or sad or whatever. It's more about noticing those subtle physical sensations.
Exactly, so like that pit in your stomach when you're nervous or the way your heart races when you're excited.
Exactly, that's interoception in action. Think about a pro athlete, say an Olympic sprinter.
Okay.
They're on the starting blocks, heart's pounding, muscles are primed for action. They don't just tolerate those sensations, they use them. It's fuel for peak performance.
It's like they're almost more in tune with those signals than someone who isn't an elite athlete.
Totally. And he mentions this study about stockbrokers.
Oh, yeah, high-stress gig?
For sure. And the ones who were more interoceptive, the ones who were really tuned into their body's signals, you know what? They actually made more money.
Really?
And lasted longer in the job.
Which, talk about a high burnout career.
It's because they're more aware of those early warning signs. So that racing heart, the tension, all that they can respond before they completely burn out,
So it's not about ignoring those feelings or trying to just white knuckle your way through it. It's more about meeting them with curiosity, like you're a scientist gathering data.
I like that. And Magnus actually says we can get better at this.
Wait, really? I kind of thought we were stuck with whatever level of body awareness we were born with.
He says stuff like mindfulness practices, meditation, and breath work are crazy effective for this.
Yeah, it's like you're creating this space to actually pay attention to what's happening internally.
And when you can do that, it changes how you deal with challenges. I mean, instead of getting swept away by that anxiety, you can acknowledge it. You can almost like befriend it.
It becomes less like this terrifying thing you have to avoid and more like information you can actually use.
Exactly. And that paves the way for us to choose a more helpful response.
This reminds me of the crazy story Magness tells about Stephen Callahan, the sailor who was lost at sea, like 76 days, I think.
Oh, yeah. Incredible story of resilience.
So Callahan, he was adrift at sea all that time after his boat sank, and he talks about these two voices in his head, right? One voice totally consumed by fear and despair, ready to give up.
I can only imagine.
But then there was this other voice. This one was calm, rational, like a captain, basically telling him to ration his supplies and keep going. And the thing is, both voices were Callahan.
It's such a good example, though, because we all have those competing voices, right? The ones urging us to give in and the ones pushing us to persevere.
And what I took from that story, what Magnus seems to be saying, is that pretending those negative voices don't exist, it's like the worst thing you can do.
They just get louder.
Totally. But when you acknowledge them, something kind of cool happens. Like you gain the power to actually choose which voice is going to steer the ship, you know?
You get to decide which one you're going to listen to.
So we've talked about tuning into our bodies, understanding those internal signals, but what about when it comes to like actual physical pain? That feels like a whole other beast.
Yeah.
Because when things get tough, the urge to just give in and avoid discomfort can be so strong.
Well, it's interesting you should mention pain because Magnus actually gigs into the science of pain.
Oh, okay. I'm intrigued.
So he talks about this study where they had participants, some were like experienced meditators, others weren't, and they kind of, well, subjected them to a bit of discomfort.
Okay, let me guess. They weren't getting like aromatherapy massage.
No aromatherapy here. They used a hot probe. Yeah, hot probe on their skin. And they were measuring both pain tolerance and then this thing called pain unpleasantness.
So not just how much pain they could handle, but how much they like disliked the whole experience.
Exactly. And here's the fascinating thing. Both groups, the meditators, the non-meditators, they rated the intensity of the pain pretty much the same.
So they were experiencing the same physical sensations, basically.
Same sensations. But here's the kicker. The meditators, even though they felt that same level of pain, they said it was way less unpleasant.
Wow. How is that even possible? It's the same pain.
That's the power of mindfulness at work. So Magnus, he says mindfulness creates this gap. It's like this space between, the stimulus, the hot probe in his case, and how we react to it.
Okay.
And the people who meditated, they were able to like observe the pain without getting totally swept away by it. Like that whole, this is unbearable, make it stop thing.
Yeah, internal monologue that a lot of times just amps up the suffering.
Totally.
Yeah.
And he's not just keeping it in the lab, with hot probes.
Yeah.
He connects it to everyday situations, like those moments when we let our emotions get the best of us.
Road rage.
Road rage.
That urge to fire off a really nasty email.
Yes. Or like when you just want to give up on something hard. He says those are all chances to use that mindfulness muscle.
Like to hit the pause button before reacting?
Exactly. Choose a different response. And he actually gives us like a little roadmap for cultivating more calm.
Okay, I'm listening. Give me the steps.
All right. Number 1, acknowledge the feeling, whatever it is. Anger, frustration, doubt. Don't try to like shove it down or pretend it's not there.
Right, that never works.
Doesn't work. It just gets louder.
It's like trying to ignore a siren, right? It's
Yeah.
just going to keep blaring.
Okay, step 2, pay attention to your thoughts.
Yeah.
Notice what's happening up there. Are you catastrophizing, blaming yourself, blaming everybody else? Just see the thoughts for what they are without judging.
Okay, observe, don't judge. Got it. What's next?
This one is kind of surprising, but admit you want to give in. Whatever that looks like, whether it's lashing out or quitting, just by like admitting the urge, I want to give up right now, it kind of loses its power.
It's like you're separating yourself from the impulse.
Yes, and that's how you build real resilience.
So we've covered a lot of ground on this deep dive. Authenticity, interoception, mindfulness. It seems like real toughness isn't about being like this superhuman who never feels anything.
Right.
It's about leaning into our humanity, understanding it better.
It's about recognizing that our bodies, our minds, our emotions, they're not the enemy. They're actually where our strength comes from.
I love that. And if you're listening to this right now and you're facing some kind of challenge, big or small, remember that question that Magnus leaves us with. How will I feel about this in a year? How about in 10 years? It's so simple, but it's such a powerful way to shift your perspective.
Because true toughness, it isn't about never stumbling or falling down. It's about having the guts to get back up, learn from it all, and keep moving forward. And on that note, this has been our deep dive into resilience. Until next time, be kind to yourself and never underestimate your own strength.